we may not be able to go get them the help that they need because this is such a remote area. So it kind of makes sense. Like out there in the woods, it's actually reasonable enough for me to think like, hey, we don't want to put someone else in danger. So
Right.
they didn't actually stop the search for Dior. They're just not using civilian volunteer helpers anymore.
It's more of like a public service decision.
Right. So around this time, then something happens. Tracking dogs pick up a scent. They pick up this scent out on Stone Reservoir, and the searchers' hearts just drop. According to Andrea Lutz from KTVB, the dogs are brought in on day one to try and trace Dior's movements and, in a worst-case scenario, find his body. No one wanted this little boy to defy statistics and be found dead, but if the evidence is there, they have to follow it and get the truth. There's just one problem. As they quickly discover, the search area has been contaminated.
What do you mean by contaminated?
So according to Heather Truly's article on Inquisitor.com, someone, and I swear I never saw a name or anything, like I couldn't find hardly any details around this, but someone had come out to Stone Reservoir and scattered the cremains of a loved one around the water. So when the dogs got a hit, this is the scent that they're picking up on and fixating on. I mean, it's what they're trained to do, right? Like they're just fixating on the wrong person.
Right.
Now, this blunder kind of forces the sheriff's deputy to admit that they really didn't secure the area properly, which allowed this person to get in with the ashes sometime after Dior went missing. Or, even potentially it could have been before he went missing. Again, they have no idea when this person came because they didn't cordon off the area or keep the scene secure, almost at all. They just had people kind of roaming free, coming in and out. And it's hard to do, right? It's a large state park. Now, personally, I don't think this was malicious. I don't think someone did this to throw police off, and police don't treat it like a deliberate attempt to throw them off either. But they're embarrassed, and they know that they've wasted days searching for something that, has nothing potentially to do with the case. And this is an awful mistake because police know that they're racing against time here. Every minute counts when a child is missing. And so they broaden their search to add more possibilities about what could have happened on that day. Like, could a wild animal have snatched Dior? Or could someone have abducted him? Now, police get rid of the wild animal theory pretty quickly because there's just nothing to support it. If an animal had grabbed Dior, odds are there would be some blood. We would see pieces of his clothes ripped off or maybe one of his boots that had fallen off, right? But there's nothing like that. Not a hair, not a fiber, nothing. And two, he's a 2-year-old boy. There's no way Dior would have gone quietly if a wolf or a bear or something came and dragged him off. Someone would have heard something. Even Bob, who's in failing health and on oxygen 24 hours a day, would have heard a little boy screaming.
So he was on oxygen and wasn't in great health. I guess as a parent, I'm wondering why you would leave your child with someone like that. Don't get me wrong. Grandpas and great grandpas are amazing and I rely on them a ton. But if I knew that someone wasn't in the shape to, run after my kid, I don't know how comfortable I'd feel with that. 2-year-olds are fast. I can vouch for that.
I was just going to say, May's everywhere all the time. You can barely keep up with her.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of baffles me as to why, Dior's parents would be very hunky-dory with the situation.
I don't know, right? So I think that maybe since it was a family trip and Bob had been to that area several times before, maybe it just didn't really cross their minds, Jessica and Vernell trusted him. So while police are still digging into these possibilities and searching for Dior, they get outside help when the FBI offers their assistance on July 30th. Now, shortly after this, in August, a parallel investigation pops up when a retired U.S. Marshal named Frank Vilt offers his services to Jessica and Vernell as a private investigator. Right away, Frank sets up his own tip line and starts conducting his own interviews with Jessica, Vernell, Bob, and Isaac. And he starts working his own angles while law enforcement keep going down their own path. But little do police know, their path is quickly going to change because Frank's findings are about to change the way everyone views Dior's disappearance. When it comes to diapers, you get what you pay for, so don't cut corners on your baby's comfort. Pampers Swaddlers absorbs wetness better than the leading value brand for up to 100% leak-proof skin protection to help keep your baby's skin dry and healthy. I know new parents get people throwing advice at them right and left. Personally, I stay out of other people's parenting unless they ask. They are all babies, not nuclear warheads. You'll figure it out. You're going to be fine. Your baby's going to be great. But if you were to ask, I have 2 pieces of advice. Do sleep training and use Pampers. Those go hand in hand, and that's how you keep your sanity, by sleeping through the night. It's no wonder Pampers is the #1 pediatrician recommended brand. Buy Pampers Swaddlers diapers and Pampers Swaddlers Overnights diapers now, and download the Pampers Club app today to start earning rewards with every Pampers diapers and wipes purchase. Frank is only on the case for about a week when he comes up with a theory. To him, the only plausible theory is that Dior was kidnapped. Now, this whole time, the Lemhi County sheriffs never viewed kidnapping as a strong possibility. The probability to them was just too low. You see, there's just one road that goes in and out of the Timber Creek campsite. So pretty much it's a straight one-way shot. So anyone in a car would have had to use that road, and their car would make noise. People would have heard it. And same thing like with off-road vehicles, like a four-wheeler, that's going to make noise too if the kidnapper took off on one of those. Jessica, Vernal, Isaac, and Bob all told police that they didn't hear anything like that. And when you think about it, it's even less likely that a potential kidnapper would be on foot. So to police, that kind of just like rules out the theory. And they never put out an Amber Alert or treat Dior like a kidnapping victim in those early days that he vanished. But to Frank, probable or not, he's sure that that's where the evidence is pointing him. And he even comes up with a possible suspect. So remember when I told you that Jessica and Vernal took Dior into town the morning that he went missing?
Yeah.
So Jessica tells Frank and his team that while they were at that Stage Stop General store, she noticed a strange man was staring at Dior, and it put her on edge because, like, in her gut, the way this guy was looking at her baby just felt wrong. Like, he was fixating and staring for way too long, so she ended up getting out of there because of that. She describes this man as being in his 50s with long white hair that was curly at the bottom. And Jessica also says that he drove a Jeep. Now, that's not a lot to go on, right? Like, not for Frank and certainly not for law enforcement.
Right.
But according to People Magazine Investigates, about a week later, Frank's tip line gets a call from a woman who says that she was out hiking with her little boys, who are about the same age as Dior, when she saw a guy out there in the woods. And she got that exact same feeling Jessica did. Like, this guy was looking too closely at her kids and maybe even like following or stalking them. Her description of this guy that she saw out in the woods matches the guy Jessica says that she saw at the Stage Stop. I mean, right down to the black Jeep Rubicon that the man was driving. Frank shares his concerns and his evidence with law enforcement. Both the Lemhi County sheriffs and the FBI take this seriously, and they do get involved, hoping that this is the breakthrough that they've been waiting for. They find the owner of this black Jeep Rubicon, and he goes in for questioning. And while he says, like, yeah, I'm friends with that Stage Stop manager, he's like, I wasn't at that store the day that Dior went missing. And he's also got an alibi that checks out, which puts investigators right back at square one. Throughout this family's worst nightmare, the police and the sheriffs are relieved that Jessica, Vernal, Isaac, and Bob stay cooperative. They all volunteer to take polygraph tests, and Jessica and Vernal do their part to keep Dior in the public eye, even as August passes into September and the case starts going cold. While all of this is happening, local law enforcement has really seen how the community has rallied around Jessica and Vernal. I mean, these people are holding vigils, organizing fundraisers to help pay Frank's expenses, and they keep up a pretty steady stream of social media posts to keep attention on Dior's case. And then, one day in the middle of September, a couple of months after Dior went missing, Facebook explodes after a picture appears online of an unidentified little boy who was just found in Stanton, California, which is down near LA. I mean, this is over 1,000 miles away from where Dior was last seen. And this boy just happens to look a lot like Dior. Here, Britt, I'm going to send you these two pictures side by side. They're from the East Idaho News. And you tell me which one you think is Dior and which one you think is the boy that was found.
Oh, man. these kids look really similar.
It looks like the same kid.
Yeah, but I think I'm going to say that the one on the left in the lime green shirt is Dior.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
But it's bizarre, right? Like they have the same, to me, the same shape eyes.
Their noses are the same.
The mouth.
Wispy blonde hair.
Yeah, even the cut of their hair.
Yeah.
It is bizarre how similar these two look. So for that reason, this post goes viral. I mean, totally bananas, because this little boy was found at a motel in Stanton with zero clues to who he might be.
He was just abandoned there?
Somehow he ended up there. And beyond the striking resemblance, like the age matches, the height matches, the weight matches, I mean, it could totally be Dior.
So if this kid is Dior, then Frank was right all along and he really was kidnapped, right? Like, that's the only way he could make it all the way down to California.
Exactly. And so Lemhi County law enforcement agree that the similarities are striking, and they instantly make some calls to Orange County, California to follow up. And what they learn is both uplifting and devastating. So by the time they call, the child in the photo has already been identified, but it's not Dior. This little boy had wandered off and had been returned to his panicked mom safe and sound, and he got his happy ending, while Idaho police have to tell Jessica and Vernal that their son isn't coming home. This is a real morale blow for law enforcement, but they're not giving up yet. However, there is someone on the case who's giving up. Frank, who's Jessica and Vernal's private investigator, just up and quits the case out of the blue in September, about 2 weeks after this viral post. Now, he'd only been working for them for about 6 weeks in total at this point.
Wait, what? Why would he quit?
So at first, he won't say. Now, Frank does send the family a resignation letter that privately kind of lays out why he's quitting, but there's no way for the public or press or anyone connected to the case or looking in on the case to know what that resignation says or what reason that he gives.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this does feel a little weird to law enforcement, but I mean, they don't know exactly what to make of it, so they don't think too much of it at the time. I mean, they still have a little boy to find. Jessica and Vernal hire another private investigator in November, a man named Philip Klein, who's based out in Texas. And they bring him in to work the case, and when he comes, he's really optimistic that he's going to be the guy who's able to solve it. As Philip ramps up his own investigation, police and the sheriff's office in both Lemhi County and Bonneville County, where Dior and his family live, keep up their investigation despite the passing time. Search efforts out in the forest are hinging on the hopes of making a breakthrough before winter, but despite more dives in the Stone Reservoir and more scouring the Timber Creek area again and again and again, they don't get their miracle. And then, in January 2016, Frank resurfaces, going public with the formal resignation letter he sent to Jessica and Vernal back in September. And this sets off a media firestorm.
Beauty is truly an attitude, which is why Sol de Janeiro products capture that spirit and the beauty secrets of Brazil. Their incredibly effective body care products are infused with nutrient-rich Brazilian ingredients in clinically proven formulas. And get this, all in reusable, recyclable, and compostable packaging. If you're asking me, you absolutely have to check out the Brazilian Boom Boom Cream, which, thanks to the caffeine-rich guarana extract, helps visibly firm and tighten the appearance of your skin, while the cupuaçu butter delivers essential fatty acids and deep hydration, all with the delicious pistachio, salted caramel, and vanilla scent. The Brazilian Boom Boom Cream is amazing to apply in the morning, after a shower, or even before a night out for an impeccable dewy glow. Right now, Sol de Janeiro is offering listeners 10% off their first order on soldejaneiro.com and free shipping with the code CrimeJunkie10. That's soldejaneiro.com, code CrimeJunkie10.
In his resignation letter, which he sent to KID Radio's Neil Larson, Frank outlines to Jessica and Vernal in detail why he's stepping away from the investigation. He initially sent this letter to them a few months ago, again, when he resigned, but he waits until January to send it to the press. And this letter is damning because he's very suspicious of Jessica and Vernal. And he's angry because he thinks that they lied to him. So here, Britt, I want you to read the full resignation letter because I think it's super important.
Okay, so the resignation letter says, Dear Dior and Jessica, as I previously informed you today via my text to your cellular telephone at 8:31 a.m., I am withdrawing from the investigation because of circumstances beyond my control, including but not limited to a breach of trust on your part concerning your refusal to allow me to make this case national. I am perplexed as to why you did not want me to advertise the $20,000 reward. I was willing to put up personal funds in the hope that the public could provide information leading to the whereabouts of your son. When I agreed to assist you, I informed you that I would work for my out-of-pocket expenses. I was willing to forego my normal hourly fee. My stipulation was that both of you would be absolutely truthful. I told both of you that if I felt that you were not telling the truth, stalling me, or otherwise misleading me, that I would withdraw from the investigation. In my professional opinion, both of you lied and misrepresented the true facts that could solve the mystery of your missing son. There are other aspects of this case that I cannot go into at this time, but simply put, I believe the searches will all be non-productive. The searches are only used by you to cover the possible crime that one or both of you may have committed. My suggestion is that you fully cooperate with the Lemhi County Sheriff and tell the truth. I do not appreciate the fact that one or both of you are spreading rumors that you have paid me. I have not received reimbursement to cover my expenses. I also feel that you are exploiting the public for financial gain. How can you live with yourselves? Sooner or later, the truth will come out.
Oof.
So that is a really kind of cryptic note. And
well, not even too cryptic. I mean, it's kind of pointed.
but like the sooner the later it will come out is eerie to me. But maybe I missed it. Did you mention a reward at all earlier?
So, no, you didn't miss it, but that's the whole thing. So, from his letter, it sounds like he wanted to advertise a reward, take this case national, and, I mean, according to his letter, put up personal funds for it. But it seems what he's insinuating from this resignation letter is that they told him not to. So, when this comes out, police are stunned. But here's the thing. Frank's not the only one who thinks Vernell and Jessica have not been totally honest. After being on the case for about 6 weeks, the family's second private investigator, Philip, who's turning over everything he finds to police, is starting to have his own suspicions. A big part of his doubt is coming from Vernell and Jessica's polygraph results, because remember how I said earlier that they had volunteered to sit down for polygraphs like back in August or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, they've both done the test multiple times between August and up to January, and both Jessica and Vernell failed, not once, but multiple times over the course of the investigation. Now, Vernell, for his part, gets angry when he's asked about failing the test, and he lies to Philip's team about the results while Philip is still working with the family. And Vernell goes from being like this mild-mannered, grieving dad on TV to like, how dare you, when he's kind of confronted by his own private investigator. And he gets very like in-your-face, condescending, and super defensive. Like, I want you to listen to this. Listen to him talk to a member of Philip's team in this recording that was released to KTVB News, and tell me what you think.
Why did you lie to me about your polygraph test?
Because that's what I was told. Check, there's an interview. That's his exact words were, it's inconclusive, but I'd say it's an inconclusive pass. Were his exact words to me. I never lied to anybody.
Okay, because when we've been told something completely different, that they told you that you absolutely failed with deception.
Welcome to Idaho, sweetheart. That's how this works, apparently.
So you're saying
You're guilty until proven innocent with everybody.
Yeah, he sounds really defensive.
He does, right? And this puts Philip's investigative senses right on edge. Like, something isn't adding up here. So he tells Vernell and Jessica that he's suspicious and he has his doubts about their stories. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that relationship breaks down in a hurry. And basically right away, Philip's contract is terminated. I mean, pretty much the same day that he tells Vernell and Jessica all of this. And that's that. The relationship is over. Except Philip isn't done. Even though he's not working for Dior's parents anymore, he is still suspicious as all get out. And he claims an anonymous member of Dior's extended family pays him to keep investigating. Now, the Lemhi County sheriffs agree with Philip's suspicions, and on January 25th, 2016, this is 6 months after Dior vanished, his parents are publicly named as suspects in his disappearance. According to KBTV News, the sheriff decides to name them suspects because the stories that they tell to both local law enforcement and the FBI about what happened that day keep changing. Even little things like where Dior's favorite blanket was and where his sippy cup was, kept changing every time that they tell their stories. And listen, it's one thing to get little details wrong because trauma does weird things to the memory, but Jessica and Vernal go beyond that, way beyond. Let me just give you an example. So, they went to that stage stop in town to get some stuff, right? So, Vernal tells investigators that Dior got really excited by this, beer delivery man parked out front. And the delivery guy was super nice and even took Dior to, sit in his truck. But police and private investigators found the delivery guy, and he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I never saw a kid. I certainly never put a kid in my truck because that's a violation of company policy. So police are like, why are you lying about this? And for Jessica's part, she tells investigators about a guy who was working at a feed store, and he was pumping diesel and playing with Dior through the truck window when they stopped to fuel up. Except, again, they find this guy, and he too is like, I never saw a kid in a car. So all of these changing stories and provable lies are really making the police side-eye the parents pretty hard.
Yeah, and they were such weird things to lie about too, completely unnecessary embellishments to this really simple, quick run to a store, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Detailed enough to make it sound believable, but vague enough for them to believe that the police couldn't really track them down in their lie.
But obviously they did, right? They did track these people down. And to me, these people that they tracked down, it makes no sense for these strangers to lie. If they saw a boy or interacted with a boy, they would have said it. So it makes no difference to these random people. They'll just tell the truth. But their truth is directly contradicting Jessica and Vernal's statements and what they're saying.
Okay, so the parents obviously can't keep their stories straight or even settle on one story, but what about Isaac and Bob? Are their stories checking out?
So here's the thing, and I think it's super interesting. So Isaac's story is consistent, but Bob's isn't. And obviously Bob is the one related to Jessica and Vernal. According to East Idaho News, Bob told Phillips investigators that he thought that there was an accident out at the campsite, but he wouldn't tell them anything else about what might have happened or what would make him think that an accident had happened. And since we know Philip worked for them from November of 2015 to January of 16, Bob had to have made this statement sometime in that time frame. But get this. On a 2017 episode of People Magazine Investigates about this case, which it was called Where is Baby Dior, Bob told them that Dior was playing over to the side of him after Jessica and Vernal left to go fishing. So he's saying Dior was out of his direct line of sight. He glanced over every once in a while to make sure Dior was still there. And he was fine. And then maybe just kind of went missing. So it's another inconsistency. In 2017, he doesn't bring up this idea of a probable accident at all.
But wait, didn't Bob originally think that Dior was with his parents and the parents thought Dior was with Bob?
Yeah, so this was so frustrating. It's super hard to put this all in a timeline and when these stories are being said, who they're being said to. But yeah, from what I can find, there's 3 very distinct stories that Bob is telling as well. And I mean, again, we know his health is failing. We know he's older. So is this him lying and being manipulative? Or is this a sign of failing age and in memory and something like that? I honestly don't know.
Yeah, there's so many stories at this point in time. And now Bob is adding even more.
Yeah.
And you're right. We know that the human mind is fallible in general when it comes to memory. But this seems even more extreme than that.
Yeah, I mean, for Bob's inconsistent stories to make sense to me, I mean, someone would have to come out and be like, yeah, he suffers from dementia, because it's not oh, Dior was, playing to my left and really he was playing to my right. I mean, you've got one where he's with you, one where he's not with you, and all of a sudden an accident that you're talking about. It's very, very strange. And all of these changing stories make the entire family look worse and worse in the eyes of both the public and police. And the once supportive community eventually turns against them. Even local law enforcement, who usually temper their words in public, go on the record with some pretty harsh words. The Lemhi County Sheriff at the time, this is a guy named Len, actually says it has to be a homicide. Those are his exact words. But even with the numerous failed polygraphs and the lies and the changing stories, Idaho law enforcement know that they don't have enough to build a case against Jessica and Vernal. So while they are named as suspects, they're not arrested. Then, in March 2016, we're now 8 months after that fateful day out at Timber Creek, Philip drops a bombshell. He goes on record with the East Idaho News and announces that cadaver search dogs got some hits back during that initial search in July. And it's weird. He's like sort of cagey about whether or not it was the same hit that came from the ashes scattered at Stone Reservoir, which we already talked about. Like, obviously, that's everyone's first thought. Like, dude, you're late to the party.
Right.
We heard about that. It turned out to be nothing. But Philip kind of persists with like this insinuation being that this is a different hit, but he won't elaborate on it because he says he doesn't want to damage a potential prosecution. So it's kind of a big question mark. And since Philip's a civil investigator, I mean, he's got different jurisdiction and rights than police officers conducting an investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Idaho law enforcement don't see him as being like a hindrance or anything. There's kind of this like mutual respect, or, you know, they have at least the same common goal of finding the truth about what happened to Dior. So I think he might be, I mean, to what he says, he might be trying to protect the investigation, protect the prosecution, but obviously he's also getting a little bit frustrated that, you know, they're not doing what he feels like they should be, and he's trying to like drop hints here and there.
Kind of like even though he's cooperating with them, they may not be cooperating with him.
Yeah, but here's the thing. That's not all Philip has to say, because he claims Jessica told him that she knows where Dior's body is. According to Philip, Jessica broke down in an interview with him and admitted to knowing the location of Dior's body. And just when you're thinking like, oh, well, you know, like he doesn't work for law enforcement, he got fired, maybe he's just taking his own hunch too far and like making stuff up, he also says that she didn't just confess to him. He says that she also broke down in an interview with law enforcement and told them the same thing, which to me is a huge accusation.
And it sounds like the case is over, right?
Well, not quite, because as Philip tells the reporter, Jessica clammed up super tight after that and wouldn't say anything else about it, neither to him or police. Philip didn't give a real good timeline of when Jessica made this revelation, but since he only worked for them for a couple of months, my guess is that it happened sometime between that November and January timeframe. Now, to be super clear, I couldn't find anything to corroborate Philip's story about Jessica telling him or law enforcement that she knew where her son's body was. But get this, while Jessica strenuously denies ever admitting such a thing to anyone, it seems like it could be a possibility because the police actually offer her an immunity deal in exchange for telling them where Dior is. In 2019, Jessica herself admitted to the offer being put on the table, but she's never clarified exactly when it happened. Now, obviously, police have already named her as a suspect, along with her fiancé. They're already suspicious of them. So, I mean, they might have just made this deal offer as like a shot in the dark, something to like shake the case loose.
Right.
Or, I mean, maybe it could be a little bit more pointed. If she had slipped up at any point in time and said more than she meant to, then maybe that's why they made the offer. They made it confident that she could take them to where he was. Now, police have never commented on this, so any opinions either way would just be speculation. Ultimately, the whole thing just raises a ton more questions in a case that's practically bursting with them. Even though Philip's claims led to increased suspicion and scrutiny around Jessica and Vernal, Idaho law enforcement still don't file any charges, and the case stays cold. Except, Philip isn't finished with his revelations. And his next revelation poses even more disturbing questions.
When life is upside down and I just need a breather, I go to my happy place, in my mind. I am in St. Augustine, Florida, at my favorite burrito place off the beach, enjoying a soda from a glass bottle. I can see myself there. And we all have a happy place. The sun, the sand, maybe the slopes or a big city. Well, Priceline wants to get you there and help you travel to your happy place for a happy price with deals you really can't find anywhere else. From Miami, Vegas, Cancun, Paris, and beyond, Priceline can save you up to 60% off select hotels, along with flights, rental cars, cruises, and more all around the world. It's such an easy service to use, and I love being able just to plug in exactly where I need or want to go, and rest assured I'm getting an amazing deal to my favorite places. See for yourself why millions of people trust Priceline with getting them to their happy place at a happy price. Go to Priceline.com/CrimeJunkie to get to your happy place. And as a special offer for Crime Junkie listeners, Priceline is giving you 15% off Hotel Express deals with code CRIME23 when you book before May 1st.
The best way to buy furniture with fast, free shipping included on every order is with Burrow. Burrow's sofas feature durable, stain, and scratch-resistant fabric made to withstand the wear and tear of guests, pets, little ones. And you guys know Chuck is my number one. We have allowed him on our couches and our beds since day one. And now that he's almost 12, I'm not going to tell him to stop now. So when we got new office furniture, I had to make sure it was Chuck-proof. And what I got from Burrow was everything I wanted and more. We picked these like chic, modern green couches. They look amazing, and the unique fabric is easy to clean, and it's stain resistant while still being super soft and comfortable. Right now, you can get 10% off your first order at burrow.com/crimejunkie. That's Burrow, BURROW.com/crimejunkie for 10% off your Burrow purchase. Burrow.com/crimejunkie.
In July of 2016, around the 1-year anniversary of when Dior vanished, Philip posts a long report on Facebook claiming that his investigators searched Vernal and Jessica's old apartment in their home of Idaho Falls and found a toddler's camo jacket, some blue pajama pants, and a pair of boots. And if you remember, these are the same clothes that Dior was supposedly wearing when he went missing. According to KBOI News in Idaho Falls, Vernal and Jessica had been evicted from their property for not paying their rent. And when they left behind a bunch of stuff. And so Philip's team of investigators got permission from the landlord to go in and look around. So in addition to the clothes, Philip said that they also found some toy cars that Jessica and Vernal had previously said were missing. They found a credit card used by an unidentified family friend to buy things Jessica and Vernal never told Philip or his team about. But they don't really go into detail about exactly what those purchases might have been or how they relate to the case. But he makes a specific point of talking about it.
So at this point, the assumption has to be that Dior never made it to the campsite at all. I mean, first, there's the witnesses that supposedly saw him at the store, and they're like, no. Then there's no trace of him or his clothes at the campsite. And then the clothes he supposedly went missing in are found hundreds of miles away? There's no way.
Right. So Philip's firm posted their report on their Facebook page, and it says that their investigative team, quote, cannot find any person that saw the child go up the mountain either the day of the event or the evening before, end quote. Here's the only snag, though. So Grandpa Bob's friend Isaac, the guy whose story has been consistent this whole time, the guy who was fishing when Dior went missing, he is adamant that Dior was actually there.
So does Philip think that Isaac is lying, or is he kind of just lumping him in with everybody else and considering him an unreliable witness?
I have no idea. In an interview with the East Idaho News, Philip said that his team is vetting some statements Isaac made, but he really doesn't go into detail specifically about those. All they're claiming is that they don't believe Dior ever made it there. I have no idea how Isaac plays into that. I mean, like so much else in this case, there's nothing to 100% prove or disprove what either Isaac or Philip are saying. So, I mean, again, who knows? It's one big scattered jigsaw puzzle, and no one, including the police, know how to put the pieces together. Law enforcement adds Philip's theory to their list, but they're not ready to discount the original story that Dior really was at Timber Creek.
I guess my biggest question would be like, what makes them think that he was at Timber Creek, you know?
That's what I don't know. Again, they're obviously and probably holding stuff back from
Right,
the public.
right.
I don't know if they did find something that they're holding on to. I don't know. Again, if you go back to that, those cadaver dog hits that Philip was insinuating happened that was separate from the cremains, maybe that was something. Maybe they picked up on a scent of his. But the fact that they're not willing to like write it off, like the fact that he was ever there, I don't.
Right, like you said, like they added it to their list. They basically aren't ruling any options out.
Yeah, everything's on the table still. Now, Philip's claims don't lead to any arrests, but as time goes on and Dior's case stays cold, relationships start to deteriorate. Jessica and Vernal break off their engagement in 2016 in the months after they're named suspects, and Jessica gets married to another man shortly after. And I know we've talked before about how, grief and the grieving process are huge stressors on relationships, and they can manifest in a bunch of different ways for a bunch of different people. So, I mean, while some people might look at this as a sign of, I don't know, whatever, I don't think that them separating or her getting with someone else is that strange.
Well, and honestly, more than anything, I see this as a opportunity. Like, if one or both of Dior's parents were involved in any way and they're not together anymore, it seems like it would be the perfect time for one of them to flip on the other. Like, we see it all the time. There's no alliance between them anymore. The relationship dissolves. Maybe there's some tension still left. Why not open that door?
It's interesting you say that because in September of 2017, Jessica made a statement to Investigation Discovery where she says that she believes Vernal could have hurt Dior. Vernal disputes this immediately, of course, but when we look back on everything we know about the case, the lies, the inconsistencies, the alleged confession about Dior's body, Jessica being offered immunity, the finger pointing to Vernal, I mean, it all just adds up to questions. Was there an accident that got covered up? Did something premeditated happen to him? Did he ever even make it up to that campsite? And if he did, where could he have gone that police didn't search? Like, I mean, I just want to take this case and shake it until everything comes loose and we finally get the truth. As recently as the summer of 2019, the Lemhi County Sheriff's Department is still making trips out to Timber Creek to search the area with cadaver dogs on the hunt for missing pieces. According to the KTVB News report from July of last year, the dogs get a hit and find a bone. But after the bone is sent to the FBI to be analyzed, it came back as just belonging to an animal.
So to me, at least, if law enforcement are bringing cadaver dogs out there 4 years afterwards, I feel like they think that Dior might have really been at the campsite and is still out there somewhere.
So, I mean, I agree. From everything they're doing, from everything they're saying, it still seems like they are so focused on that campsite. And whether that means they think it was an accident or a murder is kind of anybody's guess, since we have no idea what really happened to this poor kid. And law enforcement has never officially clarified if they're 100% certain Dior was out there or not, or what happened to him. As of today, no charges have ever been filed against Jessica, Vernal, Bob, or Isaac. Bob passed away in 2019, and to date, Dior's case is still officially opened. And if he is alive, he would now be 7 years old. If you have any information that might lead to solving this case, please call the Lemhi County Sheriff's Department at 208-756-8980. If you want to see pictures from this story or to view our source material, you can find all of that information on our website, crimejunkiepodcast.com.
And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Crime Junkie Podcast.
We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Crime Junkie is an audio.
Take a deep dive into an investigation of an unsolved murder in an immigrant neighborhood on Strangeland, a show where crime, culture, and justice collide. I'm investigative journalist Ben Adair.
And I'm veteran journalist Tinku Ray. And in Season 2 of Strangeland, we're digging into a case in Mapleshade, New Jersey.
Listen to Strangeland, Season 2, Murder in Mapleshade, now available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, Ashley Flowers here. I'm not sure if you heard already, but I am taking my show The Deck on tour to share a wildly underreported case with you all. A case that we've been on the ground investigating throughout the past year. It is one of the twistiest, wildest cases I've ever come across in all my Crime Junkie years. And this is going to be an experience like no other. It'll feel like a live true crime documentary right in front of your eyes. And seriously, you can't miss it. I'll be going to 11 different cities, and tickets are on sale now. You can find them at ashleyflowers.com. I hope to see you guys out on the road.
Support for this podcast comes from Sharper, an Apple original film. Julianne Moore and Sebastian Stan star in this thriller where an ensemble of characters compete for riches in a high-stakes game of ambition, greed, and lust that'll keep audiences guessing until the end. Sharper is now streaming on Apple TV+. Rated R. Subscribe to watch on any device with the Apple TV app.
Hi, Crime Junkies. I'm your host, Ashley Flowers.
And I'm Britt.
And the story I've got for you today is, in many ways, really familiar. It's a story about missing women, marginalized victims, police and politicians who look the other way, and at the center of it all, a man. A man whose violence against women grew out of the rejection he felt as a teenager. This is the story of the Butcher Baker of Alaska. It's midnight on June 13th, 1983, and a 17-year-old sex worker named Cindy Paulson is standing on a street corner in downtown Anchorage, Alaska, waiting for a date. Now, she isn't waiting long when a car pulls up. The man inside offers her $200, and Cindy agrees and climbs into the front seat. The guy seems shy, he's quiet, kind of unassuming, and they agree that they'll head to a nearby parking lot. When they get there, he shuts off the engine and Cindy begins. The guy is kind of playing with her hair and with her jewelry around her neck. And then, based on Cindy's own account of her story on author Leland Hale's blog, out of nowhere, this guy yanks her head up from the back of her hair, and as she gets her bearings, she blinks and realizes she is face to face with the barrel of a gun. The man tells her to keep quiet and that if she listens to what he says, he's not going to hurt her. Now, she's already in survival mode at this point, so she listens. The man drives her to a blue house not far away from where he parked and then drags her inside and down a set of stairs into a dark basement. The man sexually assaults Cindy before chaining her to a support beam while he sleeps on the couch for 5 hours. While he sleeps, Cindy looks around, basically memorizing her surroundings. There's a rack of clothing, a pool table, a foosball table, and there's a lot of hunting trophies, like literal heads of animals all over the walls. And there's a bearskin rug on the floor and a pile of wolf hides in the corner. It's obvious that this guy likes to kill things, and he's not shy about it. Eventually, when he wakes up, he finally lets Cindy get dressed and use the washroom. Now, she's obviously terrified and frankly is starting to wonder if she'll ever even make it out of here alive. And her fear of being stuck with this man spikes when he says, "You know what? Before I let you go, there's one more place I want to take you to. I want you to see my cabin, just real quick, and then I'll bring you back and let you go." According to Bernard Duclos' book, Fair Game, the man tells Cindy that they can only get to his cabin by air, and he has a plane. But in the back of her mind, Cindy is thinking, if I get onto that plane, I'm never coming back. So up until this point, Cindy has listened to every word this guy said. But this has already been the worst night of her life, and she knows it's not going to get better from here. So when he's busy loading the plane, she makes a run for it, jumping out of the door and sprinting toward the highway. The man hears her and he begins to chase, like he is right behind her, so close that she can hear him closing in. But Cindy is quite literally running for her life at this point, and by some kind of miracle, she's able to flag down a passing truck. Now, she is still handcuffed, half naked and barefoot in the gravel, and completely hysterical when she climbs into this truck and asks the driver to hurry up and get her to the Big Timber Motel.
Wait, a hotel, not the police station?
That's what the trucker said too. He's like, shouldn't we go to the police first? But she
Right.
says, no, take me to Big Timber Motel. That's where my boyfriend is. So he does, or at least close to it. But the moment the young woman is out of his cab, he is driving to the nearest phone to call Anchorage PD. Because even though she didn't want to go, he knows something is up. Like something is wrong here. He literally saw the man chasing her with his own eyes, and he wants to report it. That call to Anchorage PD comes into Officer Greg Baker, who tracks Cindy down, upset and alone at the motel. She was still handcuffed when he finds her, still half naked, still hysterical, and the boyfriend that she was planning to meet, actually her pimp, not her boyfriend, though she uses the term interchangeably, this guy wasn't around because he was out actually looking to find a way to get her out of those handcuffs. Officer Baker uses a master key to get them off of her, and that makes a huge difference in Cindy's mental state. Finally, she's able to speak to him, and when she does, she describes in detail everything that happened to her. The man and what he looked like, what he sounded like, his vehicle, plane, what he was wearing, what his house looked like, what he did. I mean, everything in excruciating detail. And I mean, there was so much detail, right down to this guy's crooked front teeth, his acne scars, and the stutter that she tells him this guy had. Officer Baker takes Cindy to the hospital for a physical exam and a rape kit. And on the way, they drive past the same airfield Cindy had escaped from just a few hours before. And just as they're going by, there is this plane taking off. And you will never believe this, but just then, Cindy yells out, "That's him. That's the plane." Police hurry and order the plane to land, but it turns out it's not actually the one that belonged to Cindy's assailant. It just looked super, super similar. But while they're there, they do find the right plane, and they get everything they need to start tracking down its owner. Now, in the meantime, they do get Cindy to the hospital, and when they get her physical exam results back, they show clear signs of sexual assault. There was semen in her body and abrasions on her wrists from the restraints, which is all the confirmation police need to start tracking down the guy responsible for kidnapping and sexually assaulting her. Now, they're able to track this guy down because of the plane that was registered to him. And when officers arrive at his house, it's a perfect match to the description Cindy gave. A blue ranch-style house with caribou antlers above the garage. And when they see the guy who owns the house, he is a dead ringer for Cindy's description too. His name is Robert Hansen. He's a local business owner, a baker actually, and he agrees to go in for questioning. And of course, he flat out denies having anything to do with Cindy's abduction and assault.
I mean, that's not a huge surprise to me, but they basically have this guy, right?
Well, not quite, because Robert actually has an alibi.
What?
He says that he spent the first part of that evening working on a seat for his airplane with a friend. And then later that night, around midnight or so, he went to a different friend's house where they drank beer and planned some kind of fishing trip. At some point, the two of them had gone to the airfield, he said, to install the new seat, that one that he'd been working on earlier. According to Tom Brennan's book, Murder at 40 Below, police actually call both of these guys that Robert says that he was with, and they both say, listen, he's telling the truth. And the thing about these guys, I mean, not only his 2 alibi witnesses, but Robert himself, they're all well-known, respected men with solid reputations within the community.
So someone that you would trust with an alibi.
Yeah, and they don't just support Robert's alibi, they also support his character. They say he's a husband, a father, again, this respectable businessman who owns and operates a successful bakery in town. Not to mention he's got a house, he's got several vehicles, this airplane, like he's someone that people look up to, someone that they would want to be. And to top it all off, Robert even consents to a search of his property too, just to prove you have the wrong guy. When police do the search, they look at his car first. Not only is it the same make, model, and color Cindy described, but she also gave them details of inside the car, right down to candy wrappers on the seat. And when they look at it, it's all there. And the house is the same thing. Cindy described this house to a T, but no matter how well she described it, police find no physical evidence. I mean, they're looking for the ropes, the chains that he would have used on her. And there is a support pillar there, yes, but there's nothing on it or around it that she could have been chained to the way she described. They did find several firearms in the home, which is almost to be expected for someone who hunts all the time like he clearly does. But Cindy had described the gun that she said had been pulled on her as a .357 Magnum with a wooden handle, and that wasn't one of the weapons that police found inside his house. At this point, there's a bit of divide among police. Officer Baker, who met Cindy, who heard her story firsthand, and the one who was with her during that physical exam, he believes that she's telling the truth. But the officer who just joined the case from the Sexual Assault Division and their lieutenant, those two disagree. They're saying this isn't rape. They think it's just some kind of trick gone wrong. They say, you know what? We need to get Cindy down here for a polygraph, and that's going to clear this whole thing up.
Wait, so they're trying to prove that she's making up her story?
Pretty much. Like, they think there was some kind of dust-up between Cindy and her John, like maybe over money or whatever, and now she's reporting a rape to get back at him, was their theory, it seems.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The woman who was found handcuffed, half naked on the side of the road, the woman who has to be violated a second time by undergoing a physical exam and a rape kit, this is the person who's being polygraphed. Not Robert.
Right. But as backwards as this is, the officers reach out to Cindy to try and bring her back in a second time to be questioned, this time with a polygraph. But here's the thing. When they go to look for her, they find out that Cindy is gone.
Where'd she go?
Advance is proud to offer free curbside services at most locations and for most vehicles to help drivers like you get back on the road. Head to your local Advanced Auto Parts to get your existing battery tested for free. Need to buy a new battery? They can recommend and install one that's right for you, including the powerful, durable, and reliable DieHard battery. Plus, Advance team members will test your starter and alternator to make sure that your car starts and charges for even the longest of road trips. They'll also install your new wiper blades for free, loan out tools for your DIY projects, perform check engine light scannings, and more. Go to advancedautoparts.com, download the Advanced mobile app, or visit a store for more details.
Cindy Paulson and her pimp had both left town in a hurry when they found out police wanted Cindy back in for a polygraph. They don't want to get tied up with law enforcement since technically they are both breaking the law, and especially so since Cindy is technically a minor. Though I have to say, sadly, that doesn't seem to be that uncommon in Anchorage during this time and wasn't even really a thing that got pointed out a ton as I was doing my research. Like, it was clear she was only 17, but there isn't a lot of discussion about her and how she got in that situation. Was she trafficked? Was, she's a minor.
Right, it was like no one cared that she was a minor.
Right.
And honestly, I can't blame her for wanting to get the heck out of Dodge. I mean, whether she realized it or not, clearly they were looking at her like it was her fault or she was lying, and I'm sorry, but that. I'd want no part of it either.
Well, yeah, and I mean, here's the thing. It was even worse back in the 80s when we're talking about. Like, I know we still have a long way to go with how marginalized groups like sex workers are treated, but back then it was somehow even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it wasn't uncommon for people to think that it can't even be rape if the woman is a sex worker, which seems so absolutely bananas today, but back then it kind of was very
It was the
commonplace.
norm. It was totally the common thought.
Now, obviously, this social context doesn't excuse anything about how Cindy was treated by police, but it does help explain why they might have done the things that they did. And don't forget, Robert's alibi was backed up by not one, but two other people, two well-respected people, and police were, finding it hard-pressed to, come up with the physical evidence to back up Cindy's claims. It's literally a he said, she said, and he is a respected businessman, whereas she is a sex worker. So when they can't find her, nothing happened. The district attorney decides not to pursue charges because of the lack of evidence, and the investigators with the Anchorage PD just drop the case. But they don't completely shut the door just yet, because you see, Robert Hansen isn't as squeaky clean as his friends made him out to be. This guy has a reputation. In his book, Murder at 40 Below, Tom Brennan says police in the area know him well enough to have a nickname for him: Bad Bob the Baker. According to an article by Laurel Andrews and Kyle Hopkins for the Anchorage Daily News, Robert was accused of rape in 1971, 12 years before Cindy Paulson told her story. And at that time, he was actually awaiting trial for charges of attempted kidnapping. And that was a whole separate incident.
Wait, what? And they knew about this when 17-year-old Cindy is found half naked, traumatized, and in handcuffs?
You better believe it.
And none of this made law enforcement think, hey, maybe we should take a better look at this guy, even though his two friends were like, oh yeah, he's fine, he's cool. Because what that says to me is he's done this exact same thing before.
Yeah, exactly.
Kidnapping and sexual assault. And not like he's rumored to have done it. Some people say that he may have participated in the past. Like, he's been charged and convicted and served time.
It blows my mind. Because, they didn't find this out, way later when Cindy was gone. They knew who this guy was.
It was already on the
known
books
to them. Yeah. According to Butcher Baker by Walter Gilmore and Leland Hale, Robert ended up cutting a deal with the DA, who actually dropped the attempted kidnapping charges if he pled no contest to the sexual assault. And basically, in the end, according to Alaska court records, he only spent 6 months in jail before being transferred to a halfway house and a work release program. But here is the crazy part to me. That wasn't even the beginning. His first conviction was in his hometown in Iowa for, and I quote, willfully and maliciously setting fire to and burning a motor vehicle, end quote.
So, basically arson.
Yeah, he served 23 months for that before being paroled, and his most recent conviction was related to theft. He actually attempted to steal a power saw from a department store. So, like we said, this guy is known to police. So, instead of completing the file and putting it away and moving on, what Anchorage PD do is they actually send Cindy's file over to the Alaska State Troopers, who were investigating a series of murders in Anchorage. All women, many of them involved in sex work. So, something had to have made them suspect this guy more than just thinking he might have been involved in Cindy's. I don't know if it was the guy who initially interviewed her. I don't know if collectively they decided to do this, but they knew something was wrong, right? And they knew that there was this other bigger case going on. So in the 1970s and 80s, Alaska was in the midst of a major oil boom, and it drew people in from all over the country, especially young women and even girls like Cindy looking for easy money or a fresh start. They were being actively recruited and told that they could make up to $500 a day dancing. So a lot of women came to Alaska during that time, but a lot of them didn't often stay long in the area. I mean, it was very much a transient population, which is why when someone disappeared, it often went unnoticed or at least unreported. But by the early 80s, police were noticing a pattern. A woman, often a topless dancer, as they are called in most of the sources that I've consulted for this episode, or even a sex worker, would be offered a generous sum of money for some kind of innocuous act, like taking photos or even just having lunch. But then she would just never come back from the date. Eventually, she'd be reported missing by family or friends, but that's kind of it. There'd be no sign of her at all. And this was happening over and over again.
Were the police investigating these disappearances back then?
Well, that's part of the issue here. I wasn't able to find much information about any kind of investigations because, like I said, I don't really think they were getting a lot of attention. So even if some of the small things were being done by police, it wasn't getting picked up by the press. And there's actually a paragraph in Tom Brennan's book that explains this, I think, really well. And Britt, I'd love for you to read directly from that excerpt.
Sure thing. The quote says, "Police were not alarmed when dancers went missing from 4th Avenue. Vanished girls could either be good news or bad news, depending on where they went and how. Worst case, it could mean that a girl had overdosed on drugs. If not found sooner, her body would turn up when the snow melted. If a dancer died, it was sad but not surprising. After all, they lived high-risk lives. The thing about living on the edge is that sometimes you fell, or were pushed, over that edge." End quote. Man, that quote is just really kind of devastating. Like, no one really cared.
Well, and I think that's part of the thing, right? Like, it seemed almost like this inevitable thing within the community.
Like these girls were disposable.
Yeah, and it was just kind of accepted, is what it seems like. But then, in the summer of 1980, a woman's skeleton was found buried in a shallow grave in Eklutna. Police weren't able to identify her at the time, and honestly, to this day, she still doesn't have a name. They call her Eklutna Annie. But I think having more than just a missing person, having an actual skeleton, started to alert people that something was wrong. This isn't something we should accept. Later, that same year, the body of Joanne Messina was found partially buried in a gravel pit, badly decomposed and picked apart by animals. Now, during this time and after, women continued to disappear. Some were reported missing, others flew entirely under the radar, but it wasn't until September 1982 when 2 off-duty officers found the remains of a woman named Sherry Morrow. She was a dancer from a local nightclub, and they found her half buried in a sandbar in the Knik River, and that's when things started to really come together for police. Sherry had been murdered. It was clear. And at her gravesite, police found a bullet casing and an ace bandage, the kind you would use to wrap a sprained ankle. According to Butcher Baker, there were 7 murdered women in total in the unofficial list created by a cop named Glenn Flothi. And, this guy, he had the whole quintessential murder detective grid on his wall of his office. You know, the kind with, pictures of the victims intertwined and connected with different people and places. Yeah, the string board. So when Cindy Paulson's file hits this guy's desk, right away, he's thinking, this is it. This is the break that we've been waiting for.
So was Robert Hansen's name new to him, or was he on some list to him already?
So Bad Bob the Baker was on a list, yes, but so were about 30 other names. But when they get this file on Cindy's case, that moves his name right up to the tippy top.
Yeah.
When Sergeant Flothi starts looking through the arrest records for Robert Hansen, a terrifying pattern starts to emerge. The same pattern the Anchorage police saw, but didn't really do anything about when they were investigating Cindy's case. There was a case of a young woman named Robin who reported that Robert kidnapped her at gunpoint in a cafe parking lot, bound her hands behind her back, sexually assaulted her, and she thought for sure he was going to kill her because instead of taking her back home, he just kept driving deeper and deeper into the Alaska wilderness. According to Leland Hale's book, Robin was able to convince Robert to let her go, which he did, but not before threatening to kill her parents and son if she told anyone what happened.
But clearly she reported it. So what happened with that case?
Not a single thing. Now, police did an investigation, and they say it's thorough, probably because her dad was a state trooper. But in the end, the DA decided not to pursue charges. Basically, he just made a deal with Robert
All right.
instead. Looking at his
Well, that was fun. Thanks for hanging out. I'll upload another video when I keep working on this lovely project. We're a little over halfway done now.